Welcome back, fellow football fanatics. This is College Football with Sam. Let me just adjust my chair so I'm as comfortable as possible, and that way we can talk college football, or I can talk college football with you at 100% capacity. And we are going on a bit earlier than we normally do, but that's something that I want to do from here on out. Mondays, Wednesdays, live typically at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Today we had just a few delays here, but we're much earlier than our usual starting time of the past at about, 8 p.m., 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Yeah, from here on out, I was just eating. That was actually the delay, is I remembered that I didn't eat for much of the day outside of breakfast, and I didn't want to come on here and be off kilter because I hadn't eaten a little bit of a snack and drank water before I went. But yeah, from here on out, about 6 p.m. Eastern Time, for next season, 2025 season, as we're pretty close to the preseason now, we will be going live more than twice a week for sure, and there will be some weeks where we will be going live more than twice a week during the preseason. But that just depends on a variety of factors, like how much news is there to report on? Is it an easier week for me in school? Like, do I even have the time to go live more than twice a week? So just wanted to provide that update to you all. But we're going to be talking about Cotton Bowl, Orange Bowl. We're just going to be analyzing those games. I'm going to be giving 10 reasons why each of these teams can win their games, because I think all of them can win their respective games. We'll also be talking about, just for a few minutes here, about Penn State football, just a little bit, about Oregon football as well, and some things about both of those programs in reaction to this season. And I also want to discuss who I think has the best chance of winning it all, ranking all four of the remaining teams in the college football playoff semifinals by what I think are their chances of winning a national championship. But before we do all of that, if you have not already, and I'll mention this throughout the video so that when new people come in, they'll get notified, and also so that when I release these as cuts, people will get notified too. I encourage you all, if you haven't already, to like the video, to subscribe to the channel, to hit that notification bell, and also comment your thoughts down below. Just do those things, be active in the live chat, comment, and if you have any questions for me, especially in the form of super chats, I would say send them, and I will wait for them until the end of the video to answer. And just because I know that sometimes the chat can get cluttered, try and save your super chats and all that different stuff for the end of the video, or your questions for the end of the video, which we're going to start off with the 10 reasons why when we hit which teams have the best chance of winning it all this season. So ranking the final four teams by their shot at winning it all, that will be the final topic we'll talk about. So if you can, save your questions until then, and also like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Someone just said Clemson's defensive coordinator is out. That might be, well, I wish I knew that beforehand. I don't have time to go in and edit, and it's a non-Big Ten topic. But I expected changes for Clemson. That doesn't shock me at all. Their defense was awful for a Clemson defense. I wonder who they'll hire as their defensive coordinator, because that will be a very pivotal hire for the Tigers, because I think next season they can be a national championship team for the first time since 2020 with all they return. The fact that their offense clearly got better compared to last season. Same with the offensive line. They have a lot of talent on defense too. I'm curious as to who they go after to be their defensive coordinator. Is it a younger guy? Is it a seasoned veteran? I wonder. And Clemson has been using the portal a little bit, I think, to compensate for some of the poor recruiting classes they've brought in. So those are just some, I don't know. I can't wait to talk about 2025, guys. And we'll be doing some of that Wednesday when we go live at 6 p.m. But, how do I put it? This show is about the here and now. Wednesday, and I think starting from Wednesday, which is ironically when I go back to school and moving on, that is when that's when we'll start really talking about the 2025 season and get into 2025 preseason content, including maybe a way too early top 10, way too early top 25, way too early, as it will be done before even the semifinals are over, but we'll have to see on that. But again, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, comment your thoughts down below. Just do all of those different things, and we'll have a blast on this show. Just pulling up some things here that I need, and then we will be ready. And yeah, that'll be very fun here. We run, I'm the only guy who runs all this stuff. I try my best, and I think we run a pretty good operation here on college football, Sam. Also, we'll get into this later, but I just pulled up Oregon's season statistics just because we're talking about Oregon and I think some changes they'll make. And yikes, I think my hypothesis, and I should have followed this through all year, but I think my hypothesis that last year's Oregon team was better than this year's Oregon team, I think that has a lot of weight to it. But anyway, let's dive deep here. And I want to talk about, first and foremost, the Ohio State Buckeyes, and also, what we're actually going to be doing here, I didn't even really expect that. Okay. Yeah, we're talking about Notre Dame, and we're talking about Penn State first. Let me just move this around. That way it's not so confusing here. Looks like everything else is pretty good. So, yeah. We're talking about why Notre Dame wins, and then also why Penn State wins. We'll talk about the Orange Bowl first, because that's the first semifinal matchup, and then we'll talk about the Cotton Bowl as well. So, again, we'll be answering questions at the end of the stream, super chats specifically, just because I'll be short on time, and I know that a lot of you have questions, but I'll try and interact with the chat in general, if at all possible. So, first and foremost, again, we're talking about the Orange Bowl here. The Orange Bowl is taking place January 9th, this Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, between the Penn State Nittany Lions and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And I want to give you today 10 reasons why Notre Dame will win this football game. Notre Dame is one of the best teams in all of college football right now, and they have achieved their first postseason win in the form of a New Year's Six Bowl or a college football playoff win in the 21st century. Not just one, not just their first, but also their second, by beating Indiana and beating Georgia in the first round and also the Sugar Bowl, respectively. And I think Marcus Freeman right now is certainly a rising name in college football. Penn State's a tough opponent, but I think that Notre Dame definitely can win this game. They're actually favored to win this game per ESPN's FPI, and they're favored by Vegas as a 2-point favorite in this matchup. So I'm going to give you, starting from the 10th most important reason, we're going to save the best for last. I'm going to give you 10 reasons why I believe the Fighting Irish can win this game and advance to the national championship. Before we talk about that, though, I want to encourage you all, if you haven't already, I know many of you watch the show and think you're subscribed, but maybe you aren't. Please subscribe to the channel. Help us get to 30,000 subscribers. We broke through 20,000 subscribers. We broke through that glass ceiling this season. I know, thanks to you, we can reach 30,000 subscribers. Like the video to help us get into the algorithm, and also hit the notification bell so that you can get notified when we go live on Mondays and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We're also going to be going live for both of these semifinal matchups, the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl, to do play-by-play, color commentary, and also we'll interact with the chat during commercial breaks. And also, we release content that isn't shown in our live shows. We're a pretty busy channel, a really busy, analytical, insightful operation here on College Football with Sam. So hitting that notification bell will help you out a lot to find our content. Comment your thoughts down below to enter our giveaway. The giveaway winners, 2 of them will be announced at halftime of the Orange Bowl. 2 will be announced at halftime of the Cotton Bowl. $20 gift card to my merchandise store, $20 Visa gift card to anything you want to spend that money on. That's the winnings of the giveaway. And also share this video around, and again, like, share, subscribe. The links to support the channel through payment or to join our Discord server where we talk college football 24/7. those are in the description and also the pinned comment. The links to those are. But let's discuss first and foremost reason number 10, starting from I think the least important reasons to the most important reasons. We like to save the best for last on the channel, talk about winners last, for example. So Notre Dame is a turnover machine, and they're not just a turnover machine when it comes to forcing turnovers. They also just don't turn over the football. I mean, they lead the nation, close to leading the nation in takeaways per game. They're fifth. They average 2.2 takeaways per game. They only throw 0.4 interceptions per game. That's ninth. They're top 20 in fumbles per game. They're top 25 in giveaways per game, only averaging 0.9. And they're second in turnover margin per game at plus 1.3. This team feasts off of turnovers. That's their primary mode of victory. And I think the Fighting Irish do an elite job at both forcing turnovers and just not coughing the football up. They don't throw many picks. They don't put the ball in harm's way. They don't cough up fumbles because their running backs are good. And some of that, of course, is the fact that as a roster and coaching staff, they're really good. But also, and I know that turnovers have some luck to them too, which is why I have this as the 10th most important reason, but they've consistently been able to win the turnover game in several of their matchups. And when you see something that is an outlier, but it's consistent, think of many national championship caliber teams who've won it all or come close, and turnovers have been a huge part of it. Maybe Notre Dame's turnover success isn't entirely a fluke. You know, history says that turnovers are inconsistent and that relying off of them can often punish you. Maybe that's the case in this game, but also maybe not. I wouldn't be shocked at all if they won the turnover matchup against Penn State. Number 9 is their special teams advantage. Notre Dame is creative on special teams. We saw this in the Sugar Bowl, and they've been able to, whether it's last year or this year, return kickoffs or punts for touchdowns. And Mitch Jeter has turned into an effective kicker. He started off the year a little bit rough, but against Georgia, he's been money. And I would also say that he's been money against Indiana. I mean, he was money in that game. He's just been a very good kicker overall. And I think that with Penn State not having as reliable special teams and Notre Dame peaking on special teams, that's a mismatch. I mean, when you look at Mitch Jeter this season, he's 11 of 18, only 61.1%, which really isn't all that good. His long is of 49. He's 50 of 50 on extra points, but in his more recent games, for example, against Georgia, 3 of 3 from 40 to 49 range. He was overall 2 of 3 against Indiana with his season long of 49. So he has been a very good kicker in the playoffs, and I don't necessarily see a reason why that's not going to continue in this matchup. He's found some confidence, he's found some consistency, and on top of that, his special teams coach and head coach prioritize that side of the ball, and they're very athletic, creative, and disciplined on the special teams core. Number 8 is quarterback Riley Leonard. Leonard is limited as a passer, for sure. I think we all know that, including Notre Dame fans, but he's elusive. He has a very good ability to avoid sacks, and he's quick as a runner, whether that's on designed runs or whether that's him simply improvising and escaping the pocket. Leonard this season has 2,383 passing yards, 18 touchdowns, 6 picks, a 137.4 passer rating. He was the player of the game against Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, despite not even averaging, I believe, 5 yards per pass attempt. Yeah, 15 of 24 for 90 yards, a touchdown, got sacked once, had 80 rushing yards, though. And that's the thing with Leonard. If you limit him through the air, you better make sure you limit him on the ground, too, because he can have success, actually, in a one-dimensional system, because his legs are that good. He's a very effective scrambler, effective runner, and he doesn't put the ball in harm's way. That one pick against Indiana wasn't really on him, for example. And in that game, 23 of 32 for 201, a touchdown, 30 rushing yards, and a touchdown. I mean, he's been effective in the playoffs. He's been effective in the regular season, especially as the season has progressed. I think he is a reason why Notre Dame can beat the Nittany Lions here and advance to a national championship. I know, again, that he's limited, but we've seen teams with limited QBs before go. I mean, Stetson Bennett or, Coker for Alabama or if you want to call J.J. McCarthy from Michigan a limited QB, I mean, they helped bring their teams and had X factors that allowed their teams or helped their teams to reach a national championship. Why can't Leonard be the same? Number 7 are the experienced linebackers that Notre Dame has. I'm specifically talking about Jack Kaiser here, who's a graduate with the program. You also have Drake Bowen and Jalen Sneed, who are some younger players, of course. But the combination of upside and experience in this room is lethal. And Kaiser has 75 total tackles, 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, a pass defended. Bowen is third on the team in total tackles with 62. He has a sack, 2 passes defended, 2 forced fumbles. Sneed, 44 tackles, 2.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. Jaden Ausberry, 51 total tackles, half sack, pass defended. I mean, this linebacker room is deep. It's lethal. It's very disciplined. It's a big part of the reason why Al Golden and his defense have success, getting pressure on the QB, stopping the run, just plugging up offenses and making life really difficult for Notre Dame's opponents. And that helps feed into, the turnovers where the linebackers force fumbles, they recover fumbles. They force teams to punt to a good special teams unit. And just Notre Dame really operates in a very systemic way where things are intentional, and that helps them win. And in this matchup specifically, they have a pretty big roster, schematic, systemic, whatever you want to call it, advantage when it comes to their secondary against Penn State's wide receivers. They have an edge there. This is a pretty big reason in my mind why Notre Dame can win the football game. Their secondary might just lock down Penn State's wide receivers entirely. We've talked about Harrison Wallace III and how he's an underrated wide receiver for Penn State. He's pretty good. Amari Evans, I think, has come on with Penn State as the year has progressed and really gelled with Kotelnicki and Aller and the Nittany Lion offense. But Notre Dame has a collection of really effective defensive backs, whether it's Leonard Moore, Christian Gray, Xavier Watts, Adon Schuler, Jordan Clark, Rod Hurd, that just lock you down. And Notre Dame loves to run man coverage. They love it. I don't think that Penn State's wide receivers necessarily have the speed, the discipline, or the technique to really break these guys in coverage. I mean, they may get some catches here or there, but Leonard Moore has 10 passes defended, 2 picks. Notre Dame on the season has 18 picks and 58 passes defended. And 14 of them came from their starting defensive back core. 6 of them from Xavier Watts, and they're fast, they're athletic. Some of them are young, some of them are more experienced, but regardless, they all play in a really nice and effective. They're all in lockstep. That secondary is for Notre Dame, so I have a hard time seeing Penn State's wide receivers really gain on them. Reason number 5 is the running back room for Notre Dame. Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. They are another elite set of running backs in the semifinals. And what I mean by that is, personally, I think that Ohio State and Penn State have the top 2 running back rooms in football. But Notre Dame's close behind, if not potentially the nation's best. We have a very elite set of running back rooms in these semifinal matchups, with the exception of Texas, but I think if not for injuries, Texas might actually be there as well. Notre Dame does a very good job of running the football, not just because of their offensive line, which, trust me, we will get to in a few minutes here. But Jeremiah Love is averaging 7.3 yards per carry with 16 rushing touchdowns on 1,076 rushing yards. Riley Leonard has 15 rushing touchdowns, 831 rushing yards on the season. Already told you about his passing capability and how it was limited. Didn't really talk about his rushing stats specifically, but I told you he's an effective runner, effective scrambler. Has almost 1,000 rushing yards on the ground. Jadarian Price has 720 rushing yards and 7 rushing touchdowns. And Notre Dame on the season, they are averaging on the ground 6.1 yards per carry, which is second, and 217.6 rushing yards per game. This team, in part because of Love and Price, really runs the football effectively. especially when it comes to earning explosive runs, and you can look at mostly Jeremiah Love for that. But Price is also extremely athletic. This is an elite running back room that will go up against Penn State and I think give their defense some issues potentially. Number 4 is safety Xavier Watts, who's a future NFL player, and as we already talked about, he makes plays. He's everywhere. He'll stuff you in the run. He'll pick off your quarterback. He will make your life miserable. He will make an offensive coordinator's life a living hell. 8 passes defended, a forced fumble, an interception, 1 for 6, and he's second on the team in total tackles with 67. The statistical profile, watching him against Georgia, watching him against Indiana, he did get banged up a little bit against Georgia, but I'd expect him to be healthy and playing. He is everywhere. Everywhere. He is an alien caliber player. So by himself, I think he is a huge reason why Notre Dame can win the Orange Bowl and potentially win a national championship because he's just that good of a player. And what I'm curious to see is what he does against Tyler Warren, who's another alien player. Can he take Tyler Warren away? Or even if he's not on Tyler Warren a whole lot, can he confuse Drew Aller? Can he be an impactful force against an elite Penn State rushing offense? There are so many questions in this matchup that Xavier Watts can be the answer to, which is why I have him high on this top 10 list for why Notre Dame can win the Orange Bowl. Number 3 is an offensive line that is deep, that is physical, and that is tough. You're talking about, Billy Scruth, Anthony Knapp, Rocco Spindler, and so many players on that offensive line that are coached by Joe Rudolph, who I think is one of the best O-line coaches in the country. They're well coached, they're disciplined, they suffered some injuries early in the season, but it's almost like those injuries don't matter because they develop well, they coach well, they recruit well, and they're very good at getting push up front, or at least doing the best that they can. Their floor is not low and their ceiling is high. I thought that Georgia did a pretty good job against that offensive line, holding Notre Dame to some minimal rushing yards, getting some pressure on Leonard. But Georgia has one of the best lines of scrimmage in all of college football. Really good offensive line when it's playing to its ceiling, and an even better defensive line that's better than what Georgia had last season. And Notre Dame, at the end of the day, held their own water, and we've seen them in games against Indiana or the regular season against some good teams where they win in the trenches. And a huge part of their success on the ground, again, is not just because of Leonard, Price, and Love, but because of their offensive line, which I think is a non-negotiable. Teams have to deal with it. Number 2, and this really blends in reasons number 5 and 3 pretty effectively and nicely, is their off-tackle rushing attack. The running back and O-line combo that Notre Dame has, and you saw it against Indiana, creates an explosive rushing attack. A huge part of the reason why Notre Dame runs the football the way they do is because of their explosivity on the ground. I mean, look at Jeremiah Love's statistical profile. Against Indiana, 8 carries, 108 yards, long of 98. Against Army, 7 carries for 130 yards, long of 68, had another long in that game. Against Navy, 12 carries for 102 yards, long of 64. Against Stanford, 6 carries for 53 yards, long of 39. Against Purdue, long of 48 on 10 carries with 109 yards, long of 34 and a touchdown. He's had touchdowns in every game for Notre Dame, by the way, except for Georgia. That's why I'm not really mentioning it. 79 rushing yards, 11 carries, but a long of 34. And against A&M, 14 carries, 91 yards, long of 29. This is a team that, yes, can get consistent 5 to 10 yard carries, but from what I've watched and what I feel, it's more so they get consistent 1 to 4 yard carries, don't give up on it, and then they hit a few times per game on those really long rushing touchdowns. And the off-tackle rushing attack they have is just very impressive, and especially a team against Penn State who traditionally like to play tight, and they have some issues tackling at the second level. I can see Notre Dame breaking off some long runs in this game, especially when it comes to factoring in after-contact yardage. And finally, this is the most important reason, and a huge part of it's not just because of how good of a coach Marcus Freeman is, but how questionable Penn State's James Franklin is in some of these big games. Freeman, period, is a better head coach than James Franklin. And I don't think there's much of an argument to that, if I'm going to be honest. Marcus Freeman has been at Notre Dame for a shorter period of time than James Franklin has, and he already has a larger volume of significant wins, and he's improving year over year over year. Now, maybe it's because of Mike Denbrock and Al Golden, but I think that the Sugar Bowl was kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back for me, where I viewed Freeman as a little bit overrated since his tenure began, in part because of some of those really stupid losses that are just mind-boggling, but I can't say that when you outcoach Kirby Smart. I have not seen James Franklin outcoach any high-level coach or any high-level team. Just haven't. So I think Notre Dame has a decisive coaching advantage here, and I think that is the biggest reason why they can win this football game. Because when you have the superior coaching and the rosters are pretty similar, that's a pretty big tiebreaker, if I'm being honest, and I think Notre Dame has that. So those are the reasons why I believe, reasons 10 through 1 through 10, whatever you want to say, why I think Notre Dame can win this football game. We're talking about, Notre Dame's coaching edge. We're looking at their off-tackle rushing game, a physical offensive line, running backs who are some of the nation's best, also safety Xavier Watts, who I think is an alien player, a defensive back, a secondary versus Penn State wide receiver edge in favor of the Fighting Irish, disciplined linebackers who also have a lot of depth, Riley Leonard, who's effective with his legs and doesn't make mistakes through the air, a special teams edge, and they force turnovers, they don't give up the football, and they've done that consistently. So those are the reasons why I think Notre Dame can win this game. Go Irish, and let's have an awesome and fun Orange Bowl. So, wow, that was pretty incredible right there. It's easy to talk about this stuff when there's just so much information to kind of, sieve through, that it's just really fun and exciting. Wow, we have a lot of people, a lot of concurrent viewers in the chat here. So, yeah. I'm just gotta, yeah. Ugh, yeah. It'll be so good to eat after this. I am hungry, but the show must go on, and these 10 reasons why videos are the longest ones. The other ones should be like 10 minutes at the most, maybe. So next up we'll be talking about Penn State here, the Nittany Lions, who I think, just for context, I think Penn State's going to win this game, despite the fact that Notre Dame does have a lot of advantages. Bless me there. Just didn't want to, say anything on air. And by say anything, I mean burp on air or anything like that. But I'm picking Penn State to win this for a variety of reasons, in spite of the fact that I think Notre Dame's a really good team, and I think they're better coached, and I think that Notre Dame does have reasons why it can win, but hopefully this video, in which I talk about 10 reasons why Penn State can win, can show you why I'm picking the Nittany Lions here, why people can be picking the Nittany Lions here. So let's kick this off, shall we? Didn't mean to do that. The Penn State Nittany Lions and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish face off against each other in the Orange Bowl. The Orange Bowl, which is the College Football Playoff semifinal at the Orange Bowl, kicks off January 9th, Thursday, at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, between the Penn State Nittany Lions and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And today, I want to tell you 10 reasons why I believe the Penn State Nittany Lions and James Franklin can win this football game, can win the Orange Bowl and advance to play in the national championship game. So that's what's on the chopping block here. We're going to start from reason 10, go all the way down to reason 1, because we saved the best for last here on College Football with Sam. But before I give you 10 reasons why Penn State can win this football game, I want you, if you haven't already, to help the channel out. Just take a few seconds of your time, like the video to help us get into the algorithm, subscribe to the channel to help us reach 30,000 subscribers, and also hit the notification bell so that way you can get notified when we release new college football content, when we go live live Mondays and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And also so that when we go live for the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl to do play-by-play and color commentary, you won't miss that because it's going to be a fun time where we'll have, hundreds or thousands of concurrent viewers. The chat will be very active. And also during halftime of those games, we'll be announcing 2 winners each of our giveaway, which includes a $20 gift card to my merchandise store and a $20 gift card to anything you want to spend your money on. It's going to be a $20 Visa gift card. So please hit the notification bell to get notified for those things, to enter the giveaway. Comment your thoughts down below on this video. And if you want to support the channel in any way and also join our Discord server, the link to that is in the description and also down below in the pinned comment. You can find the links for all those different things. But let's kick this off and start off with reason number 10. Again, we saved the best for last here. Reason number 10 is it's now or never for Penn State and James Franklin. It really is. At some point, trends do break. It just kind of is a fact of life. And I'm not saying it's going to be here. That's why it's reason number 10. This is kind of a coincidental or anecdotal reason. There's not much evidence, if any, to back this up. But at some point, trends do break. And it's time for James Franklin to win a top 10 game. And win a top 10 game that matters. I'm not talking about Utah in the Rose Bowl, which ends a season where Penn State once again didn't beat Michigan or Ohio State in 2022. Not talking about a potential Peach Bowl win last year against Ole Miss, which Penn State, of course, fumbled with. I'm talking about like the 2016 Big Ten Championship game or the 2016 game against Ohio State. That is what a win here would be equivalent to for Penn State, and it's time that James Franklin wins one of these games. At some point, the trends have to break, and this Penn State team is one of Franklin's best ever at Penn State, maybe his best ever. Number 9 is Penn State's athletic and deep secondary. A.J. Harris and Jalen Reed, I think, are borderline elite players, if not elite, and Zakee Wheatley, Zion Tracy, and Jalen Kimber do well too. I mean, they have a deep secondary. The Penn State Nittany Lions do. They have 18 interceptions, 46 passes defended on the year. Jalen Reed has 3 passes defended, 3 interceptions, a forced fumble, 2.5 sacks, and he has 92 total tackles, in which he leads the team there. Zakee Wheatley has 79 total tackles, 4 passes defended, 2 picks, a forced fumble, and 2 fumble recoveries. A.J. Harris, 4 passes defended, 1 pick. He isn't targeted all that much because A.J. Harris is a ridiculously good corner. Probably could have been Georgia's best cornerback this year, the school he transferred from after 2023. And he has 45 total tackles as well. Jalen Kimber has 35 total tackles, 2 passes defended. Zion Tracy, 33 total tackles, a sack, a pass defended, also 2 interceptions. This is a really good athletic secondary. I think their coach, Terry Smith, does a good job reloading the best he can in the secondary every year. And I think that they can do some things against whether it's, Riley Leonard and maybe the rushing attack coming down from the backfield on blitzes or stopping the run, or whether it's in coverage against a Notre Dame wide receiver room that has some questions. I think they can have success and impact the game in Penn State's favor. Reason number 8 why I think Penn State can win this game is their explosive linebackers. This linebacker room has had some issues in the regular season. It's not perfect, but in the college football playoff, they have been on fire. I mean, absolutely on fire. Kobe King has been the best linebacker all season long, but Tony Roas and Dominic DeLuca have had great games in the college football playoff, particularly against SMU, and then against Boise State, Penn State's defensive front, and yes, it was Boise State, the least talented team in the playoffs per, team talent composite, the blue chip ratio. Who knows if they were better than Arizona State or not, or if they were actually the worst team in the playoffs, but the eye test and other things say yes. But regardless, that doesn't take away from the fact that a defense held Ashton Jeanty to minimal gains. He didn't have a single rushing touchdown. He had barely over 100 yards, averaged under 4 yards per carry for much of the game. Huge part of that were the linebackers that Penn State has. I mean, Kobe King's second on the team in tackles with 88. He has a forced fumble, 3 sacks, a pass defended. Tony Roas has 4 passes defended, 3 interceptions, 56 total tackles and a sack. And then Dominic DeLuca has 38 total tackles, half sack, pass defended, and also 3 interceptions. And both Roas and DeLuca had pick sixes against SMU. You look at Drew Aller at quarterback for the Nittany Lions. He's reason number 7. He has not been good in top 25 games. Straight up. He's just not been good. Seriously. And I will prove this to you here. 3,192 passing yards is Aller's statistics right there. 3,192 passing yards, 67.4 completion percentage, 24 touchdowns, 7 picks, so 157.2 passer rating, 8.6 yards per pass attempt, and he has 285 rushing yards for 6 rushing touchdowns. And he barely fumbles the ball, and he really turns it over in spurts. So he's been a pretty good QB this year. 78.1 QBR, 15th nationally. He's been better than he was last season, but against top 25 ranked opponents, not just at the time he played him, like now, the rankings now. He has not had higher than a 149.1 passer rating. You factor that out, that's the Boise State game, he has not had higher than a 125.4 passer rating. And his QBR in these games has not been higher than an 81.3. That was against Oregon, where he had a great game outside of, 2 interceptions. So Aller is inconsistent, yes, but he has untapped upside. That's unbelievable. We've seen it almost every game he's played in, that he can make the perfect throws. Definitely has an NFL future if he continues to improve and receive better training. Drew Aller, if he is on in this game and plays the best game of his career, which we have not seen anything close to, Penn State will win. But I don't think he has to do that to have a positive impact in this game. Just think he has to make the right decisions and have an above-average game, and he'll contribute to Penn State's potential victory over Notre Dame, advancing the Nittany Lions to a national championship. Reason number 6 is that Penn State, and Notre Dame also has this too, by the way, both secondaries have an advantage against each other's wide receiver rooms. And for Penn State, this is no different. I think that their secondary against Notre Dame's wide receivers are a big reason why the Nittany Lions can win the Orange Bowl. They should have a good matchup against these Irish receivers that have some athleticism. I mean, I really like Jordan Faison's potential, but Notre Dame's wide receivers have not been consistent. Even their tight end, Mitchell Evans, who's great, is not one of the best tight ends in all of college football. So I think that, again, we've talked about, Jalen Reed, Zakee Wheatley. You look at Zion Tracy and Cam Miller and A.J. Harris and Jalen Kimber. Notre Dame on the year, they only average, despite, being second in points per play, averaging 0.587 and scoring 37.7 points per game, rushing for 6.1 yards per carry, they only average 6.9 yards per attempt and 10.5 yards per completion. For Penn State, they only allow 6.3 opponent yards per pass attempt and 10.7 opponent yards per completion. It wouldn't be shocking at all if Notre Dame averaged less than 10 yards per completion and less than 5 yards per pass attempt. That wouldn't be shocking at all in a game like this. So that's why I think Penn State can win this game, partly because their secondary has an edge over Notre Dame's receivers. Reason number 5 is the running backs for the Nittany Lions, Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton. They could be college football's number 1 running back duo, like Ohio State could be, like Notre Dame could be. We have a lot of elite running back rooms in the college football playoff right now in terms of active teams, and even before then, we did. You think of Ashton Jeanty with Boise State. I don't know if Brashard Smith was elite, but he was certainly good. Dylan Sampson was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year for Tennessee. Phil Maffa, when healthy for Clemson, was pretty good. Jordan James was a 1,000-yard rusher for Oregon, and his backup Noah Whittington was pretty good. But Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen each have 1,000 rushing yards. Allen has 1,026 for 5.1 yards per carry and 8 rushing touchdowns. Singleton is 1,015 for 6.5 yards per carry and 9 rushing touchdowns. And when you look at their game in terms of catching the football, Singleton has 342 receiving yards and 5 receiving touchdowns, and Allen has 147 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. Notre Dame is one of the best rushing offenses in all of college football. They do. It may even be the best. Penn State's one of the only teams that can compete with Notre Dame in that area because Penn State averages 5.3 yards per carry, and they don't have the same explosiveness that Notre Dame does, no, but they're very consistent in being able to slowly wear down teams through the ground. They average 2.2 rushing yards per game, get a bunch of rushing touchdowns on the ground, and I also think that they've been getting better and better in terms of running the football. When you look at the running backs specifically, they, especially Nicholas Singleton, are threats through the air. So against a Notre Dame rushing defense that's a little bit banged up, isn't perfect, and also the fact that Singleton can be used as a receiver, I think these running backs can have a very good Orange Bowl performance. Number 4 is tight end Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren is an alien player, an elite athlete who can line up at quarterback in the Wildcat, who can even pass the football from that position occasionally, and also is an elite receiving tight end, and I would say a great blocking tight end. He will help the Nittany Lions open up Notre Dame's defense, which is one of the best defenses in the country. The question is, how much will he open up Notre Dame's rushing defense? Because he's a non-negotiable. He will to a certain degree. It's just a question of how much. He has 1,158 receiving yards this season. 8 receiving touchdowns, leads the team in both of those. He has 98 receptions, by the way. That's more than double the next leader in receptions for Penn State, being Harrison Wallace with 46. Averages 11.8 yards per reception. Tyler Warren has 197 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. He also has 35 passing yards on 6 attempts. So, Swiss Army knife player. Wouldn't be shocked if, like, in an alternate universe, he played linebacker at some point or could play defense. He's incredible, and he will impact this game, and he's I think, pretty important reason why Penn State can win the Orange Bowl. I love Tyler Warren. He's an alien player, one of the best in the nation, and he does a lot to help this offense, which has some inconsistency at wide receiver. He really compensates for that in some moments. Number 3 for Penn State is a physical and tough offensive line. They sometimes struggle at pass protection, yes, but they're elite in run blocking. They were able to pound up the middle against Derek Harmon and Jamari Caldwell for Oregon. Ohio State was really the only game where they struggled in running the football, and I think part of that was the fact that Penn State in that game was playing with their food a bit. Ohio State didn't respect Penn State's passing attack at all, and Penn State was playing a little bit conservative in that matchup, kind of turtling a little bit. Outside of really that game, they've had success running the football, also against USC too. Outside of really those 2 games, they've had success running the football in basically every other game. And a huge part of that's their offensive line. And their offensive line has been a unit that gets better and better and better, especially on the interior as the season progresses. We've already talked about how Penn State averages, 5.3 yards per carry. They have 32 rushing touchdowns. Aller has been only sacked 18 times. I've been impressed with this offensive line. You're talking about Nick Dawkins, the center, Olavega Ione. You're talking about J.B. Nelson and Sal Wormley, and also Nolan Rucci, who's really come along at his tackle spot, replacing Anthony Donko, who tragically went down against Minnesota with an injury. I'm impressed with this unit. They're a non-negotiable. They're one of the best O-lines, if not the best O-line in the country right now. Number 2 for the Nittany Lions is their defensive line. It is a defensive line that is among the nation's best when everyone's healthy. Denied and Sutton has had some health issues at times. Abdul Carter right now, his status for the Orange Bowl is an unknown. And the defensive tackles are not quite as good as the DNs in total, though that's mostly due to the fact that Carter's an alien player. But I like Zane Durant, Devon J. Thomas. I think that the defensive tackle and defensive end rooms are among the deepest in the country there. Abdul Carter has 11 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 63 total tackles, and 3 passes defended. They line him up all over the field. He can be a QB spy. They can line him back at kind of a linebacker spot where he played last year. They can line him up anywhere, really any technique, and he will have an effect on the defense. Denied and Sutton has a forced fumble, 6.5 sacks, 36 total tackles. Amin Vanover has 3.5 sacks, 20 total tackles, a forced fumble. Zane Durant has 3 sacks and 39 passes defended. And you also got to look at like Devon J. Thomas, half sack, Keziah Izzard with a sack. This is a elite defensive line that's well coached by Deion Barnes, that's recruited at a high level, developed well. Many future NFL players exist currently on this Penn State defensive line, which is going to test this Notre Dame offensive line and this Notre Dame rushing offense. Reason number one for why I think Penn State can win the Orange Bowl and advance to play in the national championship is actually one player, and that's Abdul Carter. If Abdul Carter isn't healthy, Penn State's chances decrease at a significant level. If he is healthy, Penn State, according to some, maybe should be the favorite in this game instead of Notre Dame. When he's healthy, he's the nation's best defensive player. I mean, outside of him, Penn State's good at pass rush, but they're not elite. He makes their pass rush elite. He has 11 sacks, as I already mentioned, 2 forced fumbles, 3 passes defended, 63 total tackles. And he is, I think, good at defending the run, I think. When you look at how they played against Ashton Jeanty and Boise State, when they took him out, and they took him out as in Penn State took him out due to his injuries, they had to change their entire defense. And that's when Jeanty and Boise State, both through the air, but especially through the ground, began to, get some movement there. Penn State's defense overall did a pretty good job, but a huge part of the reason why they're top 10 in rushing yards allowed per game, only allowing 101, they're top 10 in opponent yards per carry, only allowing 3.1, and why they earn 2.6 sacks per game and have a sack percentage of 8.07%, both top 25 there, is because of Abdul Carter. Abdul Carter, I'm actually going to make a prediction here, even though this is more of an analysis rather than prediction video. If Abdul Carter is healthy and closer to 100% than not in this game, Penn State will win. If not, if he doesn't play or he's closer to maybe like 50% or 60 or 70%, like playable, but not playing it as even close to his ceiling, then Notre Dame will win this game. I think Abdul Carter's the most important player in this matchup. Consequently, that's why I have him as the number one reason why Penn State can win. So there you have it. Reasons number 10 through 1. We're talking about James Franklin. It's time for him to win a big game. Penn State is quick defensive backs who are also deep and disciplined. They're explosive at linebacker. Drew Aller is a good quarterback. They have an advantage through the air. Penn State does in terms of their defense versus Notre Dame's offense. They have effective elite running backs in Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. Tyler Warren's an alien at tight end. Their O-line, like Notre Dame's, is physical and one of the best. And their defensive line, with or without Abdul Carter, is deep. And with Carter, it's one of the nation's best. And speaking of Abdul Carter's a non-negotiable. It doesn't matter what offensive line he plays, he finds ways to get to the QB and make him uncomfortable and make him try to escape the pocket. So Penn State can easily win this game, advance to the national championship game. The question is, will they? Go Nittany Lions, and I'm excited for hopefully a magical Orange Bowl. And that's that right there. Let me see. Let me see what all's going on in the chat here. Looks like we got a super chat from way back. Let me actually answer this very quickly because I don't want it to get too buried. Thank you, Going for Gold _85 for the $5 super chat. I appreciate it very much. Regardless of outcome, my apologies. Regardless of outcome, being in the semi and the 12-team playoff must make Penn State fans feel so vindicated after being a bridesmaid all these seasons. Going for Gold _85. You know what? To a certain degree, I kind of agree with that, but I also want to say that Penn State played SMU and they played Boise State. And I don't think, and deservingly so, they're not going to overcome the fact they can't win those big games until if they win the Orange Bowl, they absolutely do, because Notre Dame analytically is one of the best teams in all of college football this year. They were number one in FPI for a time. They're close to number one in efficiency. I mean, they're up there with Ohio State in terms of dominance when you look at points per play margin and other things like yards per point margin. And they're an elite team relative to this season. I don't know, and I don't think they're an elite team relative to, the past 10 years, but you don't have to be to win it all this season. I think that Penn State has momentum. I think they're one of the best teams in college football. I've talked about it before on the channel, but at the end of the day, I think this is a must-win game for James Franklin. A must-win. It's different beating Notre Dame versus beating Boise State and SMU. Beating Notre Dame in this environment, I think, would be very similar to beating Ohio State in Beaver Stadium or beating Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. Like, it's closer to those games which Penn State lost compared to the games that Penn State won against SMU and Boise State. So I think there is rightful vindication felt by Nittany Lion faithful, but at the end of the day, I think they have to go further than that in my mind. So, yeah, that's that. Thank you very much for that super chat again, going for gold _85. I appreciate it a lot. I see that we have a lot of activity here, a lot of back and forth. So let's continue this. Get to, Ohio State and Texas and why they can win the Cotton Bowl, because I think that the more I look into it, the Cotton Bowl is the most fascinating matchup. And that's because I think we know the Orange Bowl should be close, based off of how Penn State and Notre Dame have played in the playoffs, in the regular season, taking in the full sample size. That is the most, we know that's going to be a good game, I think, or at least we believe that to be the case. Texas-Ohio State's very fascinating for the fact that most are expecting Ohio State to win big, but there's not just a pathway for Texas to win, although I think there's one pathway that's the most sustainable. The others are kind of, I don't really see them happening, but they exist. Texas can win. I mean, there's not just a universe where Texas wins, like 1 of 1,000. There's several universes, several simulations where I think the Longhorns come out on top. As you all know from watching my video, from me talking with Chris Drew, Baldfather Betts, from me making my own prediction video, we've done several videos on this already, and we're going to have more than 3. We're going to have 3 or more again on the Cotton Bowl. We're covering it so much. I think that Ohio State's going to win. Just lost my train of thought there. I believe Ohio State's going to win, but I don't think it's going to be this depantsing of Texas, because Ohio State's not 2019 LSU. They're not. I don't even know if they're the Georgia teams of 21 or 22. Like, I just don't know. I don't even know if they're the Michigan team of last year, because all those teams I just mentioned went undefeated in the regular season, and Georgia just had a loss to the greatest coach of all time and a Heisman-winning QB. Ohio State this year lost to an Oregon team that in hindsight was overrated, and I should have saw that coming, and a Michigan team that was just, kind of putrid. And we can't ignore the regular season and just say, well, Ohio State's hit their next gear in the postseason and it's over. Because even in 2014, when Urban Meyer did that, I think there were some signs that Ohio State was on, like the Big Ten championship game. That's not the playoffs, and they destroyed Wisconsin because, well, they had an elite ceiling and they hit it. That same season against Michigan State that year was good. That may have been Mark D'Antonio's best team at MSU, the 14 team. The problem is they played Oregon and OSU both in the regular season. Oregon outpaced them, and Ohio State just waltzed into East Lansing and dominated them for really 3 quarters after they felt each other out in the first quarter. And I feel like, and I'll mention this in these segments here, I feel like Ohio State may, and I'll have to watch it, and I'll let you guys know what I think in my deep dive on this matchup, which should release in the next 48 hours. I feel like Ohio State played to their ceiling in a game in the regular season. Not just in the playoffs, not just against Oregon, not against Tennessee. They played it in the regular season, I feel, the more I think about it. I just think it was against a different team than Tennessee or Oregon, a team that was more physical on the defensive line, that was better overall, better coached on defense than Oregon, and more talented everywhere, and also I'd still say better coached on defense than Tennessee was. And a team on defense that has an alien player, that has several future NFL players, and I think that Texas is built similar to that team. And no, I'm not talking about Michigan, because Michigan, again, is just not a great football team this year. I'm talking about a great team that Ohio State played in the regular season. Hopefully you already know who I'm referencing, that they beat, but it was close, and that team held Ohio State to the 20s. Ohio State was never scoring in the 30s on that team. Most they were going to score is 27, and the giveaway to that is they didn't, because their quarterback fumbled out of the end zone on a read option. So we'll get to that whole conversation. I'll talk about that probably some more in the deep dive. But let's get to this game, and I want to talk about first why Ohio State can win this matchup. Again, they're a 6-point favorite, they're the overwhelming favorite, so maybe I should phrase it as to why Ohio State will win this matchup. But I don't want to do too much of will. I want to do more of can, because I think that all four of these teams in the playoff, relative to this year, are elite teams, or at least near elite teams. I think all of these teams right now are top 6 in the playoffs, and I actually thought that way. I thought that before the playoffs even kicked off. Like, yes, I foolishly picked Notre Dame to lose to Indiana, for example, but I thought that Notre Dame was the better team. I just thought that Indiana had some potential advantages against the Irish, but they didn't. They didn't have, and I think Notre Dame also outcoached them. But anyway, let's get to this game right here, the Cotton Bowl, and talk about Ohio State versus Texas and why the Buckeyes can win this matchup. Here we go. The college football playoff semifinal at the Cotton Bowl kicks off Friday, didn't mean to say December. The college football playoff semifinal at the Cotton Bowl kicks off Friday, January 10th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. There is going to be a whole lot of snow. I heard correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section below, but I heard over a foot of snow around the Cotton Bowl in its location. That's absolutely crazy for Texas to have that much of an Ohio-esque weather in the time of January. Like, you'd expect Ohio or Michigan or Indiana or one of the Midwest states to have that type of snow and not Texas. But alas, here we are. I think that weather is very strange, but I also think this game could be very strange indeed. What I'm going to talk about in today's video is 10 reasons why Ohio State will beat Texas in the Cotton Bowl. That's the premise. That's the topic. That's it. We're going to start from reason 10, go all the way down to reason number 1, because we saved the best for last on College Football with Sam. It's a good way to end things off. But before we do that, I want to encourage you, if you haven't already, to like the video to help us get into the algorithm, reach more people, share the video around to also help us reach more people, and also subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. That way you'll help us reach 30,000 subscribers. That way you will get notified when we go live Mondays and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And also when we go live for the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl to do play-by-play, color commentary, analysis. We'll be interacting with the chat heavily in those games. And also, I will be announcing the winners of my giveaway during the semifinals. 2 of them at halftime of the Orange Bowl, 2 of them at halftime of the Cotton Bowl. And the winnings for that is a $20 gift card to my merchandise store. Link to that's in the description. And a $20 Visa gift card that you can spend on anything you like. How you enter that is simply commenting down below. You can comment a period if you want, and you've entered the giveaway. So comment your thoughts down below, like, share, subscribe. If you want to support the channel in ways of donating or purchasing merchandise, the links to those are in the description or the pinned comment. It's the same with the Discord server, which I highly encourage you to join. We talk college football all the time, and you get a chance to interact with me as well. But let's march on here. And I think reason number 10, of course, reason number 10 is not the most important reason why I think Ohio State or any other team we talk about in these videos, in this video series, will win, but it's still a reason. Ohio State's the best team in college football. Even if they don't beat Texas, I think it would be looked upon rather as maybe a missed opportunity for Ohio State rather than Texas being decisively the better team, or maybe that Texas has some matchup advantages. Ohio State's the best team in the country, and particularly when the best team in the country is playing towards their ceiling and they're ranked as high as they are in the power ratings unanimously, typically that team is the one who is going to win the national championship. I love to tell you, or I hate to tell you, depending on whether you're an Ohio State fan or not. This is the nation's best team. This is the nation's most talented team. This might be the nation's best coached team based off of the Tennessee game and the Oregon game, the Rose Bowl and the first round matchup in Columbus. I would lean towards saying that's the case right now. That's why they can beat the Texas Longhorns in the Cotton Bowl, because they're simply better. Period. Reason number 9 is they have effective pass blocking. Ohio State's offensive line is not the strongest in the 4-team college football playoff. People have made fun of me for this, but the reality is that it's much easier for your offensive line to function when you have Jeremiah Smith and TreVeyon Henderson, when you have a quarterback with legs and not a statue like Kyle McCord, and your defense forces opponents to constantly punt the ball back to your offense. But all that banter aside, and it's true, I mean, look at the Pro Football Focus grades, watch the film, Ohio State's offensive line is the weak point of their offense. They're effective at pass blocking. I mean, straight up they are. And that's not really up for debate. Again, as I mentioned, are they perfect? No. But they're top 10 in quarterback sacked percentage and also in sacks allowed, I do believe. Yeah, Ohio State only allows 0.9 sacks per game, which is 6th, and they allow 2.91% quarterback sacked percentage. They're effective, and especially Donovan Jackson is effective in pass blocking, the left tackle who guards Will Howard's blind side, one of the best offensive linemen in the Big Ten, definitely the best offensive lineman on the team right now with Simmons and McLaughlin down. Their effective pass blocking may give Howard just enough time to make those good throws, and also at times as well, they're effective in the pass blocking mostly, but at times you see them productive in the ground attack. If they're effective there, they can allow maybe Henderson or Judkins to just get one burst type of run, and I think that's all Ohio State needs on the ground with how good they are in the passing game, and we'll talk about that in this video. But that's reason number 9 why I think Ohio State can beat Texas. Reason number 8 is they have an overall depth advantage. This isn't higher on the list because Ohio State's so good that we have so many different positions to talk about, but it's an important one. They're deeper at more positions than Texas is deeper than Ohio State at. They're one of the most experienced teams in the country with a plethora of seniors, and they have the number 1 blue chip ratio in all of college football. Plus, Ohio State recently has been rotating more players on defense, and their offensive line, which was worse in the regular season, I think in part due to the inexperience, and they had to just send guys forward because of the injuries. They've had some time to gel now. So the team is experienced, they're very athletic, they're physical, and I think that with an overall depth advantage, that can be the difference in a close game, or it can be the reason why maybe Ohio State has their 3rd straight dominant win in the playoffs. Reason number 7 are Ohio State's running backs, especially TreVeyon Henderson, but also Quinshon Judkins. They are the number 1 running back duo in college football in my mind. I think Notre Dame has an argument for that. I also think that Penn State has an argument for that. I really do. But I would still side with Ohio State right now, mainly because of TreVeyon Henderson. 10 rushing touchdowns, 7.3 yards per attempt, 925 rushing yards, 126 carries in total. Judkins has 174 carries in total for only 5.3 yards per carry, 10 rushing touchdowns. He has a longer run, too, of 86 compared to Henderson's 66, and he has 924 rushing yards. As the offensive line has suffered injuries, Judkins' role has kind of taken a step back to Henderson's, because Henderson, because he's faster and he's better in the receiving game, works now more with Ohio State's current scheme than Judkins does, as Judkins is more of a power back and more of, like, I would say, a Blake Corum type player, where Henderson right now is, I'd say, more of like kind of a Kenneth Walker with just unprecedented speed. And when his vision's on, He'll find a hole, he'll exploit your defense, and you'll have a hard time stopping him. Through the air, Henderson is 209 receiving yards, no receiving touchdowns. Judkins is 118 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. So they can be effective out of the backfield, whether it's through scheme or their talent. This is a great, in fact, great's not even proper. They're an elite running back room nationally. Reason number six why Ohio State can beat Texas is quarterback Will Howard. He's the best quarterback left in the college football playoff per quarterback efficiency rating, and he continues to improve. Now, QBR is more of an expected points added metric, so of course, since Ohio State has the best skill position talent in the country, his QBR is going to more likely be overrated or overstate his talent and his playmaking capability than understate it. But I've watched film. I've watched him play. He's improving throughout the year. He has a 175.8 passer rating. He's only been sacked 10 times, in large part because he's elusive in the pocket. He's aware and he escapes pressure. And he has 3,490 passing yards, completes 72.6% of his throws, and averages 9.5 yards per pass attempt. When you look at him on the ground, he has 165 rushing yards and 7 rushing touchdowns. He isn't as mobile as I thought he would be at OSU, and he hasn't used his legs as much in terms of running, but he's used his legs a lot in terms of scrambling around the pocket. I'll never forget when he completely, dodged and juked out Abdul Carter to convert that 4th and 1 for Penn State or for against Penn State. I'll never forget that. That was the epitome of how aware he is and how confident he is, and he's a good QB, and he makes accurate throws, and he can improvise. So he's reason number 6 why I think the Ohio State Buckeyes can beat the Texas Longhorns. Reason number 5 is Ohio State's defensive line has a very, very high ceiling. When you look at Ty Hamilton, Tyleik Williams, JT Tuimoloau, and Jack Sawyer, and when they're on and they're playing their best ball, they are elite, straight up. Ohio State this season is first in sack percentage with an 11.24 sack percentage. They average 3.4 sacks per game, which is third. JT Tuimoloau has 10 sacks. I actually think Sawyer's better than Tuimoloau. He has 8 sacks, 5 passes defended, a pick, 2 forced fumbles. Tuimoloau has 3 passes defended and 2 forced fumbles. When you look at Ty Hamilton, he has a forced fumble, 3 sacks, 47 total tackles. And Tyleik Williams, he has 2.5 sacks, 38 total tackles. And I think that this is a Buckeye defensive line that has a whole lot of talent, a lot of future NFL players. They're deep too with Caden Curry, who has 2.5 sacks. Mitchell Melton, who entered the transfer portal, has 2 sacks. So they have depth there. After they lose all of their starters on the D-line this year, they'll have a good defensive line again next season. And Texas, in part because Ewers is not as mobile as Howard, has at times had trouble defending the passer. So I'm curious to see if this Ohio State defensive line can get pressure on Quinn Ewers and make him a little bit uncomfortable. Wouldn't be shocked at all if indeed that happens, which is why they're reason number 5 on this list. And they've been playing well in the playoffs too. Reason number 4 is Ohio State's elite linebacker group, which mainly is Cody Simon, who I think has been a beast this season. But you also got to include Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese, other players in that room who are effective. Cody Simon has had the season of his life, definitely increased his NFL draft stock. He has 97 total tackles, leads the team there, 7 sacks, third on the team there. He has 7 passes defended, which is second on the team, and he also has a forced fumble and a fumble recovery. I don't think he's the most talented player on the defense. I would leave that to Ransom or Downs, maybe Sawyer, but he might be the most effective, honestly, with how he's just all over the field. They use him in kind of this QB spy way, also bring him on blitzes sometimes, and he's just really good, one of the best linebackers in all of the Big Ten. And I think him and Styles and the players that will rotate in for them are going to do a pretty good job of making sure they keep Texas honest in the ground game, honest in the passing game as well, in both coverage and also pass rush, or maybe spying, maybe if Texas brings out Arch Manning, or maybe Quinn Ewers decides to take off since his ankle's healthy. Reason number 3 is the NFL wide receivers that Ohio State has. Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate, and Brandon Inniss. And I don't think I need to say much more than that, but for entertainment purposes, I am going to read you their receiving yards and receiving touchdown profiles. Jeremiah Smith has 1,224 receiving yards, 14 receiving touchdowns, average of 17.5 yards per reception. Emeka Egbuka has 10 receiving touchdowns, 12.8 average yards per reception, and 896 receiving yards. Carnell Tate has 611 receiving yards, 4 receiving touchdowns, 14.2 yards per reception. G. Scott Jr. and Brandon Inniss each have at least a receiving touchdown and also more than 150 receiving yards too. I know G. Scott's a tight end, but he was a wide receiver out of high school, still kind of has that wide receiver speed. He's more of a fast tight end, not necessarily a blocking tight end. This group is going to test a Texas secondary that's really good, that's actually better than Ohio State's in terms of yards allowed per catch and yards allowed per attempt. But this is going to be the best passing offense, mainly because of these receivers that Texas has played all season long. Speaking of which, Jeremiah Smith is reason number 2 why Ohio State can win this game. He's the best wide receiver in all of college football, and the staff has done a better job of targeting him and utilizing him in the college football playoffs. They just have. Against Oregon, 7 receptions, 187 yards, 26.7 yards per reception. That was a season high of his in terms of yards per reception on the year, with 2 receiving touchdowns. Against Tennessee, he also had 2 receiving touchdowns. The only other time he had 2 receiving touchdowns, by the way, was against Akron, guys. And he had 103 receiving yards, 17.2 yards per reception, and 6 receptions in total. He's an alien. 6'3", 215 as a freshman. He may grow another inch or so. His hands might get bigger, and he'll probably gain more muscle because that's how young of a player he is. He's just incredible. So he's a big reason why Ohio State can win this football game. When you look at reason number 1, I think Ohio State's safeties are honestly the biggest reason why they can win any game, or they've won all the games they have. Because Lathan Ransom's hard-hitting, he's excellent in coverage. Caleb Downs is basically allowed to do, in many ways, whatever he wants. He can line up as a linebacker. He can line up as a safety. He can even line up as a corner. He's a special player for them because he's just that good and that talented. And don't forget about Jordan Hancock either, who's been a pretty phenomenal nickelback this year. They make life nearly impossible for most offenses. They just do. They tackle well. They hit hard. Ohio State's defense doesn't force a lot of turnovers. They don't, much like last year's defense. But they're fundamentally sound. They keep everything in front of them. That's when they're at their best. Hancock and Ransom, and also Downs each have 1 interception. Hancock and Downs each have 6 passes defended. Hancock has 2 forced fumbles. Ransom has 2 passes defended and 3 forced fumbles. And Downs has 71 total tackles. Ransom has 68. Hancock has 39. They're an elite veteran group of safeties that have high football IQ, make proper plays, and make people that they tackle pay. I mean, they hit hard. And I think they're the embodiment of the silver bullets, the safety room, easily. So that is reasons number 10 through 1 why I think Ohio State can win this game. Again, those are the fact that they're the nation's best team. Their pass blocking is effective. They have a depth edge to them over Texas, but I would say over every team left on the schedule in a variety of ways. Their running backs, Henderson and Judkins, are elite. They have a fantastic defensive line, especially when playing to their upside. Their linebackers are elite, especially Cody Simon. Will Howard's been an effective quarterback this season. They have NFL wide receivers. Jeremiah Smith in particular is the nation's best. And also, their safety room, pretty phenomenal. It's the bell cow, the identity of their defense is the tackling and coverage and hard hitting and intimidation that their safeties provide. So go Buckeyes, and I hope that this Cotton Bowl is a good one and hope that everyone can get there safely due to the weather and that we don't have any delays. So that's that. We only have one more to do. That's Texas, and then we got those other 3 videos, and that's it for this matchup here. I mean, genuinely, listen, is Josh Pate doing a show? I just saw. Oh no, he just released a video. He's actually talking about something we're going to talk about. Not exactly to the same degree. I'm talking about more changes with Oregon football, not the future of Oregon football, which I think is pretty obvious. But yeah, he talked about that on his show. Okay, it doesn't look like the chat is super active, but again, I'll give some time at the end for any questions or super chats in particular that you guys have. Let's move on to Texas and Texas's angle in the Cotton Bowl and why they can win this football game, because they can. They're 6-point underdogs, but make no mistake about it, the computers think they should only be like a 1-point underdog. FPI thinks they should actually be a 1-point favorite. So I think that, yeah, this is the most fascinating game, guys. The more I think about it, the more I watch, the more I, read things online or look at, the positioning of analysts on social media, and very intelligent people too. But it feels like it's a foregone conclusion here that Ohio State's just going to blow this team out. And I don't think, for reasons we'll talk about here, I don't think that's the nature against a team like Ohio State, against a team like the Build of Texas. But we'll talk about that here. The College Football Playoff semifinal at the Cotton Bowl takes place this Friday, January 10th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And for whatever reason, correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section below, but it's supposed to snow, and it's supposed to snow hard. It's supposed to, in fact, have blizzard-like conditions and over a foot of snow. So hopefully everyone can get to the game safe and there's no delays or anything like that. But that's not the topic of today's video, even though the weather that Texas will be facing is a lot like the weather that you'd expect Ohio to be facing in the month of January, and the Buckeyes and the Longhorns are playing each other. What I want to talk to you about today is why, despite being a 6-point underdog, and despite the fact that Ohio State has been performing much better so far in the college football playoff, 10 reasons why the Texas Longhorns can beat the Ohio State Buckeyes and advance to their first ever national championship game since 2009. Before we get into that, though, I want to encourage you, if you haven't already, to like the video, to hit that big red subscribe button so that we can reach 30,000 subscribers, and also so that you can get my content in your feed. Share the video around, and also like the video again to boost our presence in the algorithm, and click the notification bell too. Those things just take a few seconds, if any, maybe even just a second or two of your time. And by hitting the notification bell, you'll get notified when we go live Mondays and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. You'll get notified when we go live to do play-by-play, color commentary, analysis, and also when I am going to interact with the chat during the Cotton Bowl and the Orange Bowl. And speaking of those two things, at halftime in those games, the winners of my giveaway will be announced. And all you have to do to enter the giveaway, you can still enter it, just comment your thoughts down below. And by thoughts, I just mean you can even comment a period. I'd like you to comment more than just a period or a number, but if you feel lazy, you can just comment down below and you'll enter with your chance to win my giveaway, which is $40 in total, $20 from my merchandise store in form of a gift card, $20 for you to spend on whatever you want to spend on via a Visa. That's the giveaway, and I'll announce 2 of those winners during the Orange Bowl at halftime and 2 during halftime of the Cotton Bowl. If you want to support the channel, check out Patreon page, merchandise store via the links in the description or pinned comment. And also there's a link to my Discord server in the description and pinned comment where I talk college football and many in the Discord talk college football 24/7. Get a chance to interact with me and also my subscribers. We have an awesome community here on College Football with Sam, so please do that. But without further ado, let's dive in. Reason number 10 why Texas can win this game is the story of, let's make this Ohio State focus since they're playing Ohio State. It's the story of 2021 Michigan. It's the story of 2022 Ohio State against Georgia, 2021 Michigan against Ohio State that year, by the way. And speaking of that same year in the playoffs, TCU against Michigan in 2022. I am telling you, everyone is picking Texas here. And not Texas, but everyone's picking Texas to lose. My apologies for that confusion. Everyone's picking Texas to lose, almost. And almost everyone on top of that is picking Ohio State to cover. Not just to win, but to cover nearly a touchdown point spread, despite the fact that the computers disagree with that. That right there is clearly a sign of some type of miscommunication. Clearly. whether that's between, the public and Vegas, or maybe between Vegas and analysts, or whatever that means. There's some type of misunderstanding here. There is, because the analytics and the facts don't necessarily agree as a whole like pie, as the whole picture, that Ohio State should just blow out Texas here. Many believe that, and it's understandable given the fact that Ohio State's the best team in college football, but Texas is a massive underdog here, and the fact that so many look at it like a foregone conclusion that Ohio State's going to win definitely should light a fire under Texas. And while I don't think it'll cause complacency for OSU knowing that team, it could. So I think it's a factor. But more importantly, the reasons get more important as the video goes on. We like to save the best for last. Reason number 9 why Texas can beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl is they have a speed and physicality combination that most teams don't survive against. I mean, look at Texas this year and how many close games they've played against, or they've played in. Arizona State in the Peach Bowl. Clemson made it a little bit close against Texas too. Let's not lie about that. Georgia, the 2 times Texas played them. Texas also played maybe a little bit more comfortable with A&M than they would have liked. But regardless of that, Texas won all of those games except against Georgia, and Georgia's coached by the best in the country in Kirby Smart, and Georgia has really good trench play, and they're really big, and they're really physical. Texas is physical, Texas tackles hard, and Texas is also fast on top of that. All those things combined make it so that Texas is probably the most physical team that Ohio State has played in the playoffs, and potentially the most physical team that Ohio State has played all season long. That's the Texas Longhorns right there. So this team, they have 18 forced fumbles, they have 44 sacks, and they have an elite rushing defense and a great passing defense too. On top of that, they have a lot of NFL talent on the O-line, and we all know about their receiver room and how fast it is and the potential they have at quarterback too. So that's reason number 9. Reason number 8 why Texas can win is they have an edge with their wide receivers, specifically Matthew Golden and Isaiah Bond, over Davison Igbinosun and Denzel Burke. Take it from me, who's watched every Ohio State game and pretty closely. Denzel Burke, whether it's against Oregon the first time around, whether it's against Michigan in that game, and some other games too, has been a little bit of a liability. It's the same thing, by the way, with Davison Igbinosun with his holds. He's been better. Burke has been better in the playoffs, but I wonder if that has more to do with other things than them, like the D-line playing out of its mind. Like Knowles, I think, taking kind of a sabbatical from the blitzes and not leaving those corners on islands, for example. Or the offense playing so well that the defense doesn't have to carry the load, or the same load that it did in the regular season. Matthew Golden's nearly 1,000-yard wide receiver, and we all know from his days at Alabama and also his time right now that Isaiah Bond's pretty good too. Isaiah Bond has 532 receiving yards, 5 receiving touchdowns. Golden has 936 receiving yards and 9 receiving touchdowns. They both average over 16 yards per reception, and Denzel Burke is allowing opponents to nearly complete like 70% of his of passes that they attempt on him. So there is a pathway for Texas to pass a little bit on Ohio State, even though Ohio State has one of the best, if not the best, passing defenses in the country. Reason number 7 is tight end Gunnar Helm. Gunnar Helm is one of college football's best tight ends, being a great receiver and blocker. This season, he's second in the team in receiving yards. He's first in the team of receptions. 58 receptions, 744 receiving yards, 7 receiving touchdowns, 12.8 yards per reception. He's a really good yards after catch guy, like really elusive, doesn't have elite speed, but he does a very good job, being shifty. He always gets additional yards after contact too, always falls forward. He's a big guy. I've mistaken him before for an offensive lineman because he's tall and he's big as well. He's really effective at blocking. I think that Gunnar Helm can, if Texas is going to have any hope at running the ball at all, which is not a reason in this video, if they're going to have any hope of doing that, Helm will be a reason why. And I'm curious to see what Helm will do against Arvell Reese or Cody Simon or Sonny Styles, or whether he's lined up with one of Ohio State's elite safeties. I wonder what he can do against him, but odds are he'll have some success through the air, Gunnar Helm will. So that's reason number 7. Reason number 6, and I want to spend a little bit more time on this than some of the other reasons, is Texas is built. They're built to win this game. It's reason number 6 why I think they can beat Ohio State. They're much closer in terms of build. Like when you look at physicality, when you look at speed, when you look at all the NFL players they have, like high-level NFL players, Texas, in that regard, is closer to Michigan and Penn State than they are to Oregon. They're closer to Nebraska, too, than Oregon when you look at just the size of their defensive line and the depth that they have at, like, D-end and D-tackle, or at least had. I thought that Oregon's D-line was pretty good and overhated, but I was wrong. I think like Derek Harmon and their D tackles I think are good, but I was very disappointed in Jordan Birch and Mateo Uiagalelei. I was. With Texas, they have 44 sacks on the year. They have 18 forced fumbles. That I don't think matters a whole lot because Ohio State doesn't turn over the ball much. They're very disciplined. But you look at what Ohio State's done this season, and against Nebraska, against Penn State, and against Michigan, what do you know? They never scored more than 21 points. And you can say they played bad games against Nebraska and Michigan, and they did. You can't say that against Penn State, though. I mean, what have we seen from Ohio State so far in the playoffs? We've seen a lot of counter, a lot of attempts to confuse defenses because they're doing that because the run blocking O-line isn't good. They need to confuse defenses to get the ground game going. We've seen them go pass first and have a lot of success through the year. We've seen a lot of brilliant scheming on both offense and defense. Against Penn State, we saw brilliant scheming with speed options. We saw counters. We saw them run Howard a bit. We saw them be aggressive. And we saw them go for some deep balls. And they didn't connect with them, but they were there at times. And they played out of their minds on defense, limiting Penn State. Their awesome rushing defense. And yet it was 20-13 was the final score. And Penn State, well, held them to 20. Maybe 27 if you want to say that Howard should have gotten that touchdown and an alternate Worley doesn't fumble. But even then, as we already talked about previously, Texas has better receivers than Penn State does. Texas has more talented offensive tackles than Penn State does. Whether you think Penn State or Texas is the better team, and I think there's an argument for either, Texas's offense is probably better built against Ohio State than Penn State's is. Also, Texas is Steve Sarkisian. They don't have James Franklin. So I think that Texas is, with their physicality, with their size, with their speed, and the fact that they're more similar to a Michigan or Penn State than an Oregon in terms of build, especially on defense, I think that gives them a really good shot here in this game. Reason number 5 is, speaking of the offensive tackles, are the offensive tackles, Cameron Williams and Kelvin Banks Jr., who are going to be NFL offensive tackles. Now, Texas has had issues protecting the QB. They have. So I'm not saying they're not going to allow any pressure from Sawyer or Simon or Tyleik Williams or Hamilton or Tuimoloau. I'm not going to say that at all. What I'm saying is there's potential there. And in the same way that Ohio State's been playing to their ceiling, and it's an assumption for a lot of people that they are, there's a possibility that Texas will, on the offensive line, especially with Ewers being healthy now, he's more mobile, therefore he can escape pressure more easily. There's a chance that Texas can give Ewers time with their offensive tackles. I mean, Texas is 83rd in sacks per game allowed, allowing 2.3. And they allow a QB sack percentage of 6.34%, 68th. When you look at Quinn Ewers and his games this season, he's been sacked 27 times. Manning's been sacked 6 times. Ewers surrendered the most sacks against Georgia, 11. 11 of his 27 sacks came from Georgia. He allowed 4 to Vandy in kind of what was a little bit of a hiccup game, 2 to Clemson, and Clemson has run blocking's horrible, but they have a talented D-line, and then 3 to Arizona State, where Texas couldn't, run the ball at all. But all I'm saying here is Texas will probably allow some pressure, looking at how Ewers has been pressured, and some of that's on Ewers, some of it's on the tackles. But there will be moments, because of the talent here, because of the coaching. Flood's a great offensive line coach. They're very talented, that Texas will have some time to throw. I don't think it will be like the Tennessee game, where Nico basically had no time to throw at all. I don't think it'll be like the Oregon game, where Ohio State could get significant pressure with 4 all the time and never blitzing. I think that these offensive tackles for Oregon or for Texas, and for Oregon too, are pretty good. But also, Oregon's offensive tackles don't have the same NFL profile. Texas is better at guard as well. When you look at number 4, reason number 4 is a healthy Quinn Ewers. I have my doubts about Ewers, but his ceiling is elite, and he's healthy. And look at his games against Clemson, against Arizona State. Even look at his second game against Georgia, which was better than his first. His second game against Georgia wasn't all that good. 27 for 46, 358 yards, a touchdown, 2 picks, missed a lot of throws. Still better than most of his games in the regular season, though. Still, where he was injured for a large portion of that. You look at his game against Clemson, 17 of 24, 202 yards, a touchdown, a pick, 87.5 QBR. Against Arizona State, 20 of 30, 322, 66.7% completion percentage, 3 touchdowns, a pick, 183.2 passer rating, and a 91.9 QBR. What is special about Ewers is his experience and how he can change the play at the line of scrimmage. He did that against Clemson on the 2 long runs. He did it against Arizona State on the 4th down. He's an intelligent QB. He's healthy. And if he plays the game of his life here, Texas can absolutely win. Even if he doesn't play the game of his life but just plays well, I think he gives a good chance for Texas to win this game, provided some other things, including the defense, which I actually think is Texas's biggest strong point of the team, is their entire defense here. Texas statistically has the best secondary left in the playoffs outside of Notre Dame, but Texas has played better passing offenses and doesn't have the same type of injuries that Notre Dame does. They also have Jahdae Barron, who won the Thorpe Award. So I would give it to Texas for the best secondary left in the playoffs. When you look at the Longhorns here, Ohio State has an elite secondary, like a really, really, really elite secondary. They're top 3 in both opponent yards per pass attempt and opponent yards per completion, second in yards per pass attempt, third in yards per completion. Notre Dame's first, by the way, in yards per pass attempt, but they're outside the top 40 in yards allowed per completion. I mean, I think they rely a lot on playing incompetent QBs and being very boomer bust in the secondary at times. Texas is first, though, in opponent yards, or Notre Dame, I think, is actually third or top 5, in yards per pass attempt. Texas is first in yards per pass attempt, allowing 5.5, which is, again, first, and they're second in yards per completion allowed, allowing 9.3. They only allow opponents to complete 58.77% of their passes. They only allow opponents to average a 101.3 passer rating, which is second nationally. Jahdae Barron, I think, will be tested. Will be tested by him, as in Jeremiah Smith. But Taff, Makuba, and others are effective, in my mind. Like, this is one of the better secondaries in all of college football, if not the best. They tackle well. They do a good job defending. They're defending the end zone. I look at especially Jahdae Barron, who again won the Thorpe Award, but also Taft, who's been a very effective safety. Michael Taft has 10 passes defended, 73 total tackles, 2 picks, and a forced fumble. Makuba has 5 picks. Jahdae Barron has 5 picks and also has 11 passes defended, a sack, and 61 total tackles. Jalen Gilbo has a sack, 3 passes defended. Also forgot to mention that Makuba has a forced fumble. So this secondary for the Longhorns will be tested by Ohio State's wide receiver room. But what if they can limit Ohio State's passing attack? There's a good chance that they can do that. This Texas secondary can, as it's much better than any secondary that Ohio State's played all season long. Number 2 are the lethal linebackers of the Longhorns. Anthony Hill Jr. is the number 1 linebacker for the 2025 NFL Draft, and he has depth behind him as well. mainly speaking of David Benda. When you look at Anthony Hill Jr., he leads the team in total tackles with 107. He has 7.5 sacks, a pick, 4 forced fumbles, and a pass defended. I've mentioned before that Cody Simon's a beast. Anthony Hill Jr. is better. He's also a younger player, too. He's one of the best, if not the best, linebacker in all of college football. And you look at David Benda with 60 total tackles, a forced fumble, and a sack, and Leone LeFou with two sacks, 2 passes defended, a pick, a forced fumble, and 59 tackles. I like Texas's linebacker room. You know, they're fast, they tackle well at the second level, they're disciplined. Pete Kwiatkowski and Johnny Nansen are commanding one of the best defenses in all of college football right now. The linebackers are a big part of it. Reason number 1, though, is their D-line. Now, do I think Texas has the same upside at D-line that, let's say, a Michigan or Penn State do when they're healthy? The answer to that's no. Because they don't have an Abdul Carter, they don't have a Mason Graham, they don't have a Kenneth Grant. I don't even think they have a Josiah Stewart. But they have Colin Simmons, they have Trey Moore, they have Brycen Moore, they have Vernon Broughton, they have Ethan Burke, they have Bill Norton, and they also have Alfred Collins. They have 7, maybe even 8 or 9 playable defensive linemen. I think that only the 2 D lines I mentioned beforehand, like Penn State, Michigan, maybe Ohio State, are up there in terms of playable defensive linemen. And the difference is Texas rotates all the time, literally all the time. Their leader in sacks is Colin Simmons, who only has 44 total tackles. He has 9 sacks. He has a pick 2 and 3 forced fumbles. Trey Moore, UTSA transfer, has 5.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles. Brycen Moore has a fumble recovery, a pass defended, and 5.5 sacks. Vernon Broughton has 3 sacks, a forced fumble, and 3 fumble recoveries. When you look at Ethan Burke, he has 4 passes defended, a pick, and 2 sacks. And Alfred Collins has a sack and 53 total tackles, and he's been a huge presence, along with a forced fumble, on the interior of the D-line for the Longhorns. And this is reason number 1 because of Ohio State's offensive line. And I think that the Longhorns on the D-line will make it very hard for Ohio State to run the ball, and I also think they'll get some pressure on Will Howard and get some sacks, get some passes that have to be thrown away to live on another day. This is a elite Texas defense with one of the nation's best defensive lines. It's not quite Michigan's. I don't think it's quite Penn State's, but I think it's better than Ohio State's, or at least pretty close. It's in that ballpark. I go back and forth with that, by the way. The more I research Texas's D-line, the more I'm impressed with it. But the more I don't want to say it's better than Ohio State's D-line quite yet. I'll leave it as a push. We'll decide on my deep dive, which you should hit the notification bell before you watch. You should hit the notification bell, so that way you can watch my deep dive when it comes out in the next 24 to 48 hours. But those are the 10 reasons 10 through 1, why Texas can beat the Buckeyes. We're talking about the fact that they're a big underdog here, massive public underdog. They have team speed and physicality that's impressive. I think that their wide receivers have an edge over Ohio State's corners. Not safeties. Didn't say safeties. I think Ohio State's safeties have an edge over Texas's wide receivers. Gunnar Helm, being the impact player he is, Texas is built to play a game like this against Ohio State and make it close, potentially win. Ewers is healthy. They have NFL offensive tackles. They have a secondary that's among the nation's best. Their linebackers are incredible. They have a future NFL player at linebacker, and their defensive line is very deep, and they also have explosion there, especially with Colin Simmons, who might be at a close to a similar level, although I think Jeremiah Smith is a obviously more impactful freshman. I think a better freshman too, but Colin Simmons is an alien, and he's a true freshman as well. So definitely a name to keep in mind. Let's have a fun Cotton Bowl. Go Longhorns, and hopefully everyone's safe, and hopefully the game isn't delayed. Well, that right there are those 4 videos, and it's not even 9 yet. This is why this is fun. If we started at 6, I think that it wouldn't even be 8 yet. and this could be over by 8. So, let me just look at the chat here. Yeah, okay. Yep. So we've done those 4 videos. We have. The Texas one was a little bit, I think, rough at the end, but that's because it's honestly, like, it's harder to see Texas winning the game against Ohio State than it is Ohio State beating them, or than it is for any team to win the Orange Bowl. Just frankly is, because Ohio State's that good, and they're hot. But while I think it is hard to see Texas winning compared to Ohio State winning, like, yes, Ohio State should be the favorite, as I already talked about, I mean, we've seen Ohio State play this way before, like they've played in the playoffs. They weren't quite as effective with it, but against Penn State, they were running counter. They were running speed options. They were coaching circles around Penn State like they coached circles around Tennessee, like they coached circles over Oregon. They were trying their hardest to get the ball to Jeremiah Smith, whether successful or not. If Texas can do what Michigan, Penn State, and Nebraska did on defense, and they can play a much better game than either of those on offense, that combo is possible. They can win. They can. Ohio State's not 2019 LSU. You put that team on a field with 19 LSU outpaces them. Like, it's just is what it is. It's the same thing with 2001 Miami or 2020 Bama. And Ohio State hasn't even won the national title yet. So to talk about, like, I'm asking people to hold your horses. Like, I'm picking Ohio State to win, and I'm telling you to hold your horses, because the more I hear that it's going to be an automatic OSU victory, the more I get scared that I've made the wrong pick, because that stuff exists. Like, think of 2022 Michigan versus TCU. Michigan team wasn't quite as veteran as this Ohio State team. I'll say they may not even been as good as this Ohio State team. Certainly weren't as high ceiling and talented. But they had a good coaching staff. They had good players. They had veterans in a lot of places, and TCU beat them. And that TCU team is not as good as this Texas team. Like, straight up. Not even as talented in any way, and not as physical in the trenches either. So it's just something to keep in mind, and I focus on that and not the Orange Bowl, because everyone is talking about how the Orange Bowl is going to be a good game. And everyone's already talking about how Ohio State's going to win and reasons why they should win, or can win, and they should win, and they absolutely can win. But I just wanted to mention that right there. But let's move on and talk about some other teams for a few minutes here. Just let me crack my neck. Oh, feels better. All right, so we can move on now, and I'm going to talk about, I'm going to say just a few minutes here, like 5-10 minutes, why Penn State should expect to win it all. And then we'll talk about some other things, and then stream will be over. So let's do this. Okay. The Penn State Nittany Lions have the longest odds to win the national championship. That's right. Penn State under James Franklin in 2024 has earned their most wins under Franklin. Let me restart that. The Penn State Nittany Lions have the longest odds to win the 2024-2025 College Football Playoff National Championship. They're an underdog to Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl, and they will be an underdog per FanDuel, barring something insane happening to either Texas or Ohio State in the national championship game if they beat Notre Dame. So they have the shortest odds, or the longest odds. I'm going to need to restart that again. I don't know why I'm so jittery. It's probably because I'm hungry, but we're close to the end of this video, guys, so don't worry. The Penn State Nittany Lions have the longest odds to win the College Football Playoff National Championship. Despite that, though, they can win it all. And I think that Penn State is underestimated. And therefore, I want to discuss an opinion of mine that maybe is bold, but I think is justified. I think that Penn State, as in Nittany Lion Nation, not the locker room. The locker room has to stay humble. The locker room has to focus on what James Franklin always says as being 1-0. They have to focus on what's in front of them. The fan base, I think, And maybe privately, or maybe in the back of their minds, the team too should expect to win it all. Not that the season's a failure if Penn State doesn't win it all. But I think that after going so long without winning a big game, without beating Ohio State, without winning the Big Ten, never reaching the college football playoff, the 4-team version under Franklin, I believe the Nittany Lions should expect to win it all. They should want that because they can. They can win it all. And before I tell you some reasons why I think the expectation should be set and why I think they can win it all, if you haven't already, like the show, like the video, share the channel around, subscribe to the channel to help us get to 30,000 subscribers, hit the notification bell so that you can get notified when we go live Mondays and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and also so that we go live for the Orange Bowl and Cotton Bowl to do play-by-play and color commentary and announce the winners of our giveaway. You'll get notified when that happens. And if you want to enter our giveaway, winners will be announced halftime of the Orange Bowl and Cotton Bowl. Just comment your thoughts down below, or comment down below, and you'll enter the giveaway. And if you want to support the channel, it's appreciated, not expected, but if you want to, the links to the Patreon page and merchandise store are in the description and pinned comment. And join our Discord server, where you get to interact with me and my college football fans, members of the College Football with Sam community, and the link to that's in the description or pinned comment. But why Penn State should expect to win it all is the fact that we have not seen them win anything of significance outside of maybe if you want to count the 2022 Rose Bowl, but even that I would question. It's a postseason win that is not a part of the playoffs, and while it's meaningful relative to that season, I'm talking about meaningful nationally for a long period of time, something that stamps you in college football history. Penn State has not won the Big Ten since 2016. They have not beaten a team that is top 5 in FPI since Ohio State that season in 2016. They have not won a national championship since 1986. Before that, 1982. They have not had a season before this year with more than 11 wins since 1994. Now they reached 13 this year. They're 13-2, 8-1 in Big Ten play, tied for second. They made an appearance in Indianapolis, which I think that alone was kind of a success. Won the games they were supposed to. Only lost to Ohio State by 7, which stung, but at least they didn't get blown out. And they've shown all year, I think, that they have an elite ceiling. It's a different era of football. The 12-team playoff is the reason they have 13 wins. If this was the 4-team playoff, Penn State would have made it with an opportunity at most to earn 13 wins if they won their semifinal game and won the national championship. They wouldn't have an opportunity to win 14 or 15 games, which if Penn State wins it all, they're going to be 15-2 at the end of the year. It's a different era. And this team is still closer to the 2022 or 2023 or 2019 or 17 or 16 teams in terms of achievement than it is to the average Ohio State season in the 21st century, or to the Joe Paterno teams in 1994 or 2005, where they only had one loss, or the 94 team should have played for a national championship. They were a national championship caliber team that season. I think because of how long it's been, and now Penn State's in a position to where they have a pathway. They're only a 2-point underdog to Notre Dame, and it's not like they'd be TCU in the national title where they were a 13.5-point dog to Georgia. They'd be a 7.5-point dog to Ohio State in terms of future bets, and that's a what-if right now. It's a hypothetical line. Could move closer to Penn State depending on what happens in those games, and they would be a much shorter underdog to Texas if Texas somehow pulls the upset and wins the Cotton Bowl. And again, they're not a big underdog whatsoever to Notre Dame, only a 2-point underdog. So that's, I'd say, reason number one why they should expect that. Reason number two is the players they have. Drew Aller is viewed as a future pro, would be, if he declared for the 2025 NFL Draft, one of the best quarterbacks in terms of, in terms of being a pro prospect. Kaytron Allen and Nicholas Singleton, who also are rumored to be back. Aller confirmed it, but it's rumored that both Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton will be back in 2025. They were a part of the 2022 recruiting class. Allen was a 4-star, Singleton was a 5-star, and the Penn State Gatorade Player of the Year. They have 1,000 rushing yards, and right now they are one of the best running back duos in the country. You add in Tyler Warren, who has 1,158 receiving yards and 13 total touchdowns. He's an alien player, one of the best players in the country, the best tight end in the country. And then add further on that, you have Abdul Carter, when healthy, might be the best defensive player. I think is the best defensive player in all of college football. So Penn State has the roster. And look, I admire Bud Elliott. I like him. His blue chip ratio thing is genius. It's simple. Some criticize it for being redundant. But he's mentioned, even, I've criticized it in the sense that he has, where it's not the end all be all. There might be a team in the future who's an exception to the rule, but it's kind of a general, simple rule that you have to have a very talented roster to win it all. Now, Penn State doesn't have an Ohio State blue chip ratio. They don't have an Alabama or Georgia blue chip ratio. They don't have an Oregon or Texas blue chip ratio. But I will tell you this, from watching film, from processing all the games in the college football playoff and the regular season, Penn State might be the second best team out of those teams. Seriously. Out of all those teams with a better blue chip ratio than they do, Penn State might only be worse than Ohio State, who beat him in the regular season and has looked unstoppable in the playoffs so far, which is the reason why I'm ranking them ahead of Penn State. Penn State's a good team. They have 2 alien players. They have a plethora more X-Factor players. They have a quarterback who some say could be an alien player who has that potential. That's why he was given the Josh Allen comparisons. And Penn State, analytically, is extremely impressive. I mean, we're talking about a team with the Nittany Lions that is top 10 in yards per play, an offense that Kotelnicki has resurrected this season. They score 0.503 points per play, 11th. They're top 5 in points per play margin. This team is 8th in yards per play, averaging 6.5. They average 5.3 yards per carry, 18th on the ground. They have the best rushing offense in the Big Ten and one of the best rushing defenses in the Big Ten, only allowing 3.1 yards per rush attempt, 8th, and 101 rushing yards per game, also 8th. If you factored out sack yardage, they might have the best rushing defense in the Big Ten. So this is a really good team, and really good isn't explaining Penn State's level. Penn State is an elite team relative to this season. Relative to last season, prior seasons, I don't think so. And maybe they're only near elite this year. But this is the closest in terms of proximity, which largely has to do with the playoff changes, but also in terms of straight up roster talent and performance that Penn State has ever been to a national championship. So therefore, they should expect to win one this year. I think the season is at least mostly a success, maybe a full success, or at least not a failure if they beat Notre Dame. I truly believe that. I would lean toward the season being a success if Penn State beats Notre Dame, because James Franklin finally beat a top 10, and I'd say with Notre Dame, top 5 opponent, and is playing for a national championship. But I think that, especially with it being likely that Penn State, if they do win the Orange Bowl, is going to be playing Ohio State again in a rematch, it's hard to beat a good team twice. A rematch with OSU in a neutral field, and with Notre Dame ahead of you right now in the Orange Bowl being only a 2-point favorite, Penn State should have the expectation to go out, win a national championship. Their first national championship since 1986. If they don't get it done this year, with Drew Aller returning, with Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen likely returning, and a lot of players on offense and defense coming back, I think they'll have a pretty good shot next year too, but you never want to bank on next year. You want to bank on the here and now and be invested in that. So I believe in Penn State. I think they can win it all. Does that mean I'm going to pick them? Not necessarily. I think they'll beat Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl, but I have a hard time, of course, seeing them against Ohio State in a rematch with how Ohio State's playing, beating that team. I think it can happen, but that doesn't mean I'm going to pick it. So I hope the Nittany Lions play well, play to their potential. I'm a guy who likes to see blue bloods succeed. So it's fun to see Notre Dame and Penn State both compete for a national championship spot. Hopefully the Orange Bowl is good. And I think that if Abdul Carter is healthy and Penn State, I think, coaches a good game, which is a question, but it's a possibility, they can win the Orange Bowl and perhaps win a national title. My phone's about to die, so hold on. Hopefully I can get it before it's dead, because I use that to like time my videos here. Oh, nope, it died. So there's no point in doing that, but that's okay, because we only have 2 more topics to talk about, and then we will get on out of here. Someone asked how many ranked teams did Penn State beat? Just asking. Let me see. 10-3 Illinois, 11-3 SMU, 12-2 Boise State. They beat 3. But none of them will probably finish ranked inside the top 10. If there is going to be one team who will, it's Boise State. All those teams won 10 games. I think that, I don't know. It's been a problem for Franklin, which is why I think the expectation has to be there. Is, the time is now or never. Now, or maybe next year, but Aller is on track to being Penn State's best quarterback since Kerry Collins. So, if you can't win with that level of talent, are you ever going to win? It's a valid question. Okay. Up next, we're talking about Oregon. The Oregon Ducks got destroyed by the Ohio State Buckeyes in the Rose Bowl. 34-0 at the 2-minute warning in the second quarter, 34-8 at the half, and then 41-21 at the end of the game, where even though Ohio State had some sputtering and hiccups in the second half, went a little bland at times, they were still able to really hold Oregon off. The game was never close. It was only close when it kicked off. It was embarrassing. Dan Lanning looked shell-shocked. He looked like a guy who just woke up out of his bed and went down to the refrigerator at 3 a.m. and is just staring like at the refrigerator, mouth open, eyes wide, just looking for something to eat, or maybe like a glass of milk to down. It was not a good game whatsoever. And I think because of that game, and because I have a lot of respect for Dan Lanning, I think he is an elite head coach, I believe that Oregon will be making changes. I don't know if they will be roster changes. I don't know if they'll be staff changes. But I believe that said changes are coming to the Oregon Ducks. I mean, look at Oregon this season compared to last season. Last season, Oregon was 5th in SRS. They were top 4 in FPI. They were ranked much higher in FPI last year being a stronger year than this year. So you have to weigh that in. So per power ratings, they were much better last year than they were this year. And last year, they were second in points per game, scoring 44.2. They only allowed 16.5 points per game, which was ninth. Their strength of schedule was 41st, yes, but that Washington team was a team that was probably beating everyone or playing everyone except for Michigan within one score, and they lost to them by 3 both times. And one of those games could have went the other way, and then maybe Oregon is playing in the playoffs instead of Washington last year. Last year's Oregon was a really, really good team. I mean, they were more dominant in general than this year's team was. I mean, crushing Utah, pretty easily putting away USC, even though they played like a C game, destroying Cal, annihilating Arizona State, annihilating Oregon State. Again, not a very tough schedule, but still, outside of that Texas Tech game and those Washington games, they were pretty dominant, whereas this year's team had more hiccups. The 2024 Ducks, meanwhile, scored only 34.9 points per game, which was 17th, and they allowed 19.4 points per game, which was 16th. Their strength of schedule per sportsreference.com, this is different from ESPN, but they provide, points per game, opponent points per game, so I just wanted to use them as a reference this time around. Only the 19th toughest strength of schedule. And very much like last year, they played a really good team, really well coached with a lot of alien players, because Washington, had Rome Odunze and day 1, day 2 NFL offensive linemen. They played a team like that twice, and in hindsight, it felt like this year's Oregon team should have finished like last year's. They should have lost to OSU twice, beaten everyone else, and yeah, like finished 12-2 or 11-2, because if they lose to Ohio State at home, then Ohio State goes to they go to Indy and they play either Penn State or Oregon, depending on how all those tiebreakers work. But that's yesterday. And the reason I make that comparison is Dan Lanning wants to improve year over year over year. You see it in recruiting, where they brought in the best recruiting class in the Big Ten. They have one of the best transfer portal classes in the Big Ten. I believe that this team is going to make changes. And before I get any further in this, I want to ask you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and also share this video around. Hitting that notification bell is so important because you'll get notified when we go live Mondays and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. You'll get notified when we go live to cover the Cotton Bowl and Orange Bowl, do play-by-play color commentary. And also, we'll announce 2 of our giveaway winners for the Orange Bowl and the other 2 for the Cotton Bowl. So 4 winners in total with a $20 gift card in general. That's one of the winnings. The other is a $20 gift card for my merchandise store. So you'll get notified when those happen. To enter the giveaway, just comment your thoughts down below. And if you want to support the channel, check out the links in the description and also the pinned comment. And with those links is also our Discord server, which I would highly encourage you to join. We need more Oregon fans in our Discord server. I would think that Tosh Lupoy should be looking at a different type of employment after 2024. Since I don't have any deep staff connections, I can say things that sometimes should be said. And that should be said. Tosh Lupoy, from his time at Alabama and his time now at Oregon, has been a weakness and a liability for the Ducks. They allowed 19.4 points per game this year, which with, shortened game due to the meta of the game changing and the clock rules isn't as impressive as it once was, only allowing 19.4 points per game. Letting Ohio State score 34.5, humiliating. Penn State ran for nearly 300 rushing yards, and they might have the best rushing offense in the country, but still, with the talent that Oregon has, that was bad. That was unacceptable. In 2023, they allowed 16.5 points per game, but against Washington, they allowed a combined 64 and an average of 32 points per game. In their biggest games, they have allowed points, and this extends all the way back to 2022, where Oregon allowed 27.4 points per game, which was 75th. They allowed 49 to Georgia pretty quickly. They allowed 41 to Washington State. They allowed 37 to Washington in a loss at home, 38 to Oregon State, where Oregon State ran for a bajillion yards, a billion, trillion, whatever yards. They allowed 17 to Utah, who Utah's never had exactly a dynamic offense, and they allowed 27 to North Carolina in the bowl game that year. He's never had even a near elite defense. His defenses at the very best have been good, maybe great. And with Oregon, if you want to be an elite program, you got to be elite, strive to be elite on both sides of the ball. And I think that a bigger concern for Oregon is not necessarily their assistant coaches, but Tosh Lupoy. I mean, he looked like he didn't know what he was doing against Ohio State. And you want to beat Ohio State, right? If you're Dan Lanning in Oregon, you beat it once, and you felt how good it was. I'm a Michigan fan, so I know how good it feels because Ohio State's the, premier program in the Big Ten most years, and for now still is. Oregon's the one team, though, in the best position to catch them. If they beat Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, they would have become the premier Big Ten program, in my mind, because you beat Ohio State twice, you won the Big Ten, where unless Penn State were to win it all, you'd be the furthest team to advance there. And it was a horrifically missed opportunity. I mean, Oregon came out, and especially on defense, it looked like they thought they could do the same thing as they did the prior game. And it was the same thing on offense, too. I like Will Stein, so I think that was just either a bad game by him or maybe just Lanning. But Tosh Lupoy, I think there has to be a change there. And whether you want to go in the Big Ten and hire a new defensive coordinator, I think Minnesota's Corey Heatherman, Wisconsin's Mike Tressel, USC's DeAnton Lynn. You could poach DeAnton Lynn away. You have the money if you're Oregon. One of those hires, or maybe you want to go for someone else outside the Big Ten or a name that I didn't bring up. There need to be changes at Oregon. And the other change that's coming, this is already set in motion, of course, is the roster. they're recruiting at a higher level. I think Oregon still develops pretty well. I don't make much of the lost quarterback where he's just going back to Cal where he was originally committed. I guess he just likes, the fact they brought in Brian Harsin is what it sounds like. Overall, their recruiting class with what they brought in some players who could be alien players on day one and players who will be good down the line. They have a lot of money, a lot of resources. I think Lanning is a elite coach still. I think the first Ohio State game proved that. I think the Penn State game proved that. I think the fact they were the only team to go undefeated before the playoffs proved that. So Oregon still had a successful year overall, but it ended on a poor note. And you can make changes after successful seasons, and you should, especially if you want to continue to level up. Next year, Oregon should expect to win the Big Ten. They should. Same thing with Ohio State. With all that Penn State returns, they should expect to as well. And with that in mind, I think Oregon needs to make changes. I think Tosh Lupoy needs to go out. I think there needs to be an upgrade at defensive coordinator with his assumed firing or parting of ways from Oregon. Don't know if that'll happen, but I think it's what should happen. And of course, recruiting and using the portal systemically and selectively. That needs to be a priority as well, and making sure that you're at the top of your game in strength and conditioning and position coaching. All right, now all we have to do is talk about the 4 best teams remaining in the playoff. I'll just do 2 minutes per team, and then we'll get on out of here. Let's see if we have any more super chats or questions that anyone wants to ask. Let's see. I'm also going to pull up ESPN's FPI and also the S&P Plus ratings for this video. That way people can know when they're watching. No, it doesn't look like we have any more super chats. So, yeah. We'll just move on here. All right, so let me pull up FPI, pull up S&P Plus right here. So, let's kick this off. Actually, oh crap, I forgot to edit that. You know what? I hate to do this, but I was in a little bit of a rush, as you guys could already know. I will record this on my own tonight or tomorrow. It'll just be a 10-minute video, a little bit of a special. I think we've done enough for today. We've been live for 2 hours and 11 minutes. So to compensate for that, for y'all, what I'll do is I'll stay on for 5-10 minutes, maybe 15, and I'll just answer questions for you guys. That's what I'll do here. I'll answer questions. Guys, have any questions, any super chats, send them on in. If not, we'll just end the video here and there, and I'll schedule these cuts out for some of them for tonight, others for the next few days. Let's see what you guys have in here. Armand says he enjoyed the live stream. Thank you. Nathaniel Lathy, 34-0 deficit. Called the realtor to put the house on the market. Yeah, it was bad. It was so bad. And Oregon played pretty passively too, punting at the end, kind of giving up. There's also the one where 4th and 1 early in the game they punt. It's got to be aggressive. You were aggressive and you were lethal the first time. Second time around, you're not. It's just kind of, I don't know, strange. But thank you all so much for watching. Nathaniel Lathy says, go Buckeyes to you, Nathaniel. To Jay Lamont, who I know is probably still on, go Irish. I hope you guys have a great rest of your night. I'll see you again when I'm live. I'll see you again Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. Be there. Yeah, had a lot of fun. Make sure to make sure to subscribe. I'm excited for the future of the channel and for just everything. I'm very excited. Armand says, how do you juggle everything, Sam? Do you sleep? I do sleep. Yes. And I make sure to do other things as well. It is a learning process. The extra yard, what makes Lanning different from Mark Helfrich? Lanning brings in top 5 recruiting classes. Also, Dan Lanning outcoached Ryan Day the first time around. That's what makes Lanning different from Mark Helfrich. He is not Mark Helfrich. I think Cristobal did set up Lanning to be in a fairly good position if I'm being honest. But Lanning's recruiting like at an elite level. They're developing pretty well. I think this year they wanted to try and reach a national championship, and they relied a little bit too much on the portal. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes in the future. All right, guys. I'll see you around very soon. Thanks again for watching. Bye-bye.